Obeke's lecture will be as robust as her intelligence and her accomplishments all over the world. I personally look forward to this lecture. But before she to give an abridged citation of this woman of timber and caliber, please welcome with me Mr. K.S. Ogumba.
Please, may I request that the guest speaker stand as I read her citation? Thank you. Ms. Funke Opeke is founder and CEO of Main One, a broadband infrastructure services provider that built West Africa's first privately owned open access submarine cable system interconnecting Lagos, Nigeria, Accra, Ghana, and Seixal, Portugal in 2010. Funke Opeke graduated from the Department of Electronic and Electrical Engineering of University of Lagos, now Obafemi University, Ghana, in 1981. Following graduation, she completed her NYSC with the Project Engineering Division of NNPC in Lagos, working on projects including the Warri-Kaduna Pipeline. Shortly after completing her NYSC, she departed for Columbia University in New York, where she completed a master's degree in electrical engineering in May 1984. Upon graduation, she sought employment in the United States with ADP, and during a 20-year-plus career in the United States, she was employed in various engineering, consulting, and then management roles in companies, including RCA Communications, PA Consulting, Allied Signal, Telcordia, SendMail, and Verizon Communications, where she ended her career in the US as Executive Director in the Wholesale Division. She returned to Nigeria in 2005 as CTO of MTN Nigeria. In this role, she had overall responsibility for MTN's network operations in Nigeria. And then she left to work with Transcore on the privatization of Nitel. And then in 2007, she founded Main Street Technologies, which birthed what we know today as Main One in 2008. The company has won numerous awards. Main One has grown to become the leading provider of wholesale and enterprise connectivity and data center services across the West African region, and the company partners with major global technology companies to deliver services to its customers. Please, I humbly request, with a resounding round of applause, that we welcome today a very special entrepreneur, a trailblazer, a pace setter, an inspiration to all female engineers in Nigeria and across the world, Ms. Funke Opeke, to deliver her guest lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very kind and flattering introduction when I reflect back on my years at OAU. And I must admit that in those early years, Oduduwa Hall was the place to be, more for movies, I don't know if that's still the case, than for lectures of this nature. But before I start, please permit me, the Vice Chancellor who has departed, the Dean of the Faculty of Technology, the Head of Department of Electrical Engineering, special guests of honor, and special indeed, our distinguished professors, and the honoree of the day, other distinguished members of various faculty. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to give this lecture. It is a great honor for me to be invited to give this lecture in honor of our distinguished faculty who have made contributions that have been impactful on both the local and global stage. Of course, I'm a business person, not in academia, so I am totally intimidated having to give a lecture on a subject in which I doubt I know as much of most of you in the audience. Nonetheless, I will try my very best to do some justice as much of the issue most of you of electronic devices and instrumentation in national development. First, before I dive into the topic, I want to start with a brief history of the faculty, some of which has been addressed by the chairman of the event here today. The faculty was actually established in October 1972 by the chairman, and we heard about previously was part of the Faculty of Science and Department of Physics, where they had electronics. But October 1, 1972, when the campus moved to Ileife, the department, the Faculty of Technology was established, and it was established to address areas of technology not being covered by other Nigerian universities, and really to drive the promotion of technology in Nigerian society. The Vice Chancellor, Professor Oluwasanmi, stated in his convocation speech of 1971 that, and I quote, "We have not created a faculty of technology merely because it would be a fashionable addition. We have taken into account our society's needs for rapid promotion of technology. Located as we are in a rural environment, we believe the technologies we develop should be closely linked to the problems of rural communities." And so the faculty grew from 20 students who graduated in 1973 to a peak of 3,500 students in the faculty and a staff strength of over 200. Administratively, the first Nigerian Dean of Faculty was also from the Department of Electrical Engineering, Professor V.A. Williams, from 1975 to 1977. And the two distinguished professors we're honoring here today have also served as Dean of Faculty, as we have heard previously. We are most especially delighted, and once again, we thank the Vice Chancellor that he is stepping up to the task of living and delivering the aspiration of so many of us alumni and faculty, and especially the retiring faculty who have worked so hard towards the Department of Electronic and Electrical Engineering have its own permanent building. Indeed, we must thank Vice Chancellor Professor Ogunbodede for rewriting the history of our department. I know my reconnection with the faculty, both the retiring faculty and some of the existing faculty today, a few years ago, after my return to Nigeria, was on this very matter of how are we going to ensure that we have our own building. And Professor Kehnide was particularly passionate about having that happen before he retired. And so we want to thank Professor Ogunbodede for making that actualization of the vision a reality. Through the years, even squatting with the Department of Physics, and I think squatting is something that probably started during my time in the university, and it's something that a lot of the students here today are quite familiar with. Our department has made significant contributions, both on a nationwide and global scale. Some of those achievements include having the first semiconductor clean room in Africa, which produced electronic components like diodes, transistors, and solar cells to use in semiconductor devices. And I still remember the clean room on the upper floor at the extreme end with Professor Oshashana scurrying in and out of that clean room facility. iLabs The university today provides leadership for West Africa. It's a leading hub of access to laboratory experiments via the internet in partnership with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And this enables our students who require experiments that are not catered for in the university to actually have the experience of conducting those in a virtual setting. Again, the development that will be critical if we're going to continue to provide a world-class education and exposure to our young people. And finally, I want to talk about, and some of this has been mentioned, the notable alumni that the university and our department in particular has produced on a global and national scale. Be it engineer Ernest Ndukwe, who revolutionized telecommunications in Nigeria by deregulating our industry and bringing on the inception of mobile telephony into a kind of sustainable way into Nigeria. Emmanuel Ekwem, Carl Toriola, who is Vice President of MTN for all of West Africa today, Lekon Akinyomi, MD of Lekoil, which is an oil and gas company listed on the London Stock Exchange. Philip Ogunbono, who was my classmate, who is a professor at the University of Wollongong in Australia. Tayo Akimade, who's a friend and a mentor, who's a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And I think we just heard about Kofi Makiwan at the University of Delft in the Netherlands. And the list goes on and on, so I don't take too much of your time this afternoon. But the reality is that despite these laudable projects and alumni who have been able to play on a global scale, when we look around us, Nigeria is really still barely scratching the surface in terms of technological innovations. And little progress has been made in the fields of electronic devices and instrumentation that both Professors Kehnide and Adegboyega specialized in over 40 years ago. Indeed, we must admit that the gap between the department's capabilities and world-class practices has significantly grown within the past 30 years. I commend the leadership of the department for initiatives such as iLabs, which is a testament to the continued yearning to provide students with relevant laboratory or practical experience in an environment where funding is no longer available to keep pace with technological development. What are some of those technological developments in the context of electronic devices, we may ask? Well, first is the explosion of micro devices and chip technologies. And if we wanted to scale that from the clean room that we had on the third floor of the physics building, that market worldwide today is forecasted to be $451 billion this year. $451 billion. And less than 10 countries, fewer than 10 countries, and one region of the world actually participate in producing this technology. The United States has approximately 50% market share, followed by Korea, Japan, the European Union, Taiwan, and China in that order. All other countries buy from these markets. Now, designing and fabricating devices has become so expensive. If you look at the scale of that, $451 billion, even major multi-billion-dollar tech companies like AMD and NVIDIA have backed away from fabricating their own devices, and they simply design for other companies to manufacture, typically companies in Asia. Now, annual R&D spending on semiconductors alone is more than 60. Say, I believe the GDP of Nigeria is about 600 billion, so that's 10% of that going into R&D on semiconductors. So these semiconductors and microelectronics, I don't have to tell you, have revolutionized almost every walk of life. Communications, education, healthcare, robotics, avionics, automotives, instrumentation, power, military, major driver for economic growth and for technological progress in the electronics value chain. The phenomenal growth that we have seen in ITT, certainly that has been the focus of my career, is only possible based on innovation in microelectronics. This expertise continues to prove relevant and is also proving essential for the implementation of future trends, such as the Internet of Things, machine learning, artificial intelligence, smart homes, and autonomous vehicles. The possibilities that these technologies bring to the table are endless. But when we reflect upon it, IoT, or the Internet of Things, is simply communications coupled with instrumentation, a combination of a communicating device and a sensor or listening device that is able to sample a situation or gather some data. You couple that with advances in artificial intelligence, data and analytics, security, and you see some of the new solutions that are being developed to improve the quality of living around the world today. The challenge is, such a gulf has been created in the past 30 years. We have to ask ourselves the question, how can our department, and indeed, how can Nigeria get back on the technology value chain and make a more meaningful contribution? Globally, the challenge we face is that this innovation is really publicly funded by very wealthy nation states. Countries like the United States have the National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense, which work on research on the future of electronic materials to continue to strengthen that industry for the development of their country and economy. China, as an example, has also made significant investments in artificial intelligence and machine learning because they plan to grow the giants of the future in that space. In today's competitive environment, our university and indeed department must therefore start focusing on what new partnerships are required with what leading companies, foundations, and other research-intensive institutions that can allow it to participate and add value in that value chain. These partnerships cannot just be about transferring knowledge that we have come up with in our labs into practice. The relationships are critical because they would provide funding for faculty and students to pursue the research rather than the research seeking a home in industry. But the academia and industry would need to align interests to come up with relevant ideas to deliver impact in a rapidly changing world. Short-term collaborations could consist of on-demand problem solving through contract research and consulting. Long-term collaborations could be joint projects or PPPs, joint university industry research centers, to allow firms contract for services on a long-term basis, open-ended basis, so that it actually enables the university to build capacity over time. The reality is Nigeria no longer has the skill requirement today for instrumentation or electronic devices. We do not have much of an electronic equipment industry, and the scale of the demand of the global market far exceeds what our immediate capacity can fund competitively. If we look at the value chain, we have to be creative in identifying areas, starting with services and applications, with lower barriers to entry that enable us to participate meaningfully. Perhaps we could grow critical mass in some of those areas, which over time would extend back towards core device development when those applications become of scale. In addition, we could drive value through the customization and assembly of electronic products for the African market. But we have to question whether the critical skills required for the manufacture of electronic devices are something we want to invest in, or whether the design and application of those devices built in other markets to our requirements would give us more opportunity to add value and be relevant in today's digital world. These issues really highlight the challenge that we face and the challenge that is faced between developed and developing countries such as Nigeria. The stakes are quite high, and really it is an issue or a challenge which leads us to question the role of government and policy to promote university and industry collaboration. Though it may not be when those applications become of scale. We cannot ignore the requirement for our government to provide funds and to better provide adequate funding for our universities. In addition, government has the obligation to provide the necessary infrastructure, electricity, communications infrastructure, roads, water, dormitories. I know the list goes on and on for the academic environment and learning and research to thrive. Beyond the immediate needs of the universities, the government also has a responsibility of providing support for universities to foster intermediate organizations such as technology transfer offices, science parks, and business incubators. That cannot be said to be the case in Nigeria today. While we do have some government agencies such as the NCC that are leading efforts to encourage and fund research, and they have done some innovative work in some universities, it truly is a drop in the bucket. And again, we question how many of those solutions that are developed will acquire the required scale to solve the monumental problems we face in our society today. The level of funding is simply inadequate to close the gaps. The reality, though, is we do have programs, and it is time we challenge ourselves to see how some of these programs that we have, such as UN and Empower, can be tailored to include criteria tied to innovation and research projects on campus. Will some of our brightest and best students opt to stay on campus for another year or two and work on a graduate research scheme if they will be paid a stipend to develop an idea that can turn into a startup company in a few years, rather than go out and have that idea and apply for a grant and win, but not have the mentorship and the support that they could receive in an institution of learning such as OAU to further develop their idea? In recent years, we have also seen innovation hubs around the country with both government and private sector funding. Are universities not more fertile ground for such facilities? And how do we get our university in the game and lobby for government funding so that they can place some of those hubs on or close to campus? I have some experience with the work that has been done in Yaba, which is now coined Silicon Yaba, and University of Lagos is now actively part of the fray in bringing broadband services to some of the startup hubs, CC Hub and Andela. We look back today, and over the past 5 years, these companies have attracted over $100 million in funding. What opportunity will that represent if such funding came into a tech hub
in OAU, and what kind of research might that allow us to conduct? What kind of innovation would that allow us to drive out of the universities? We believe that our government can establish policies that align some of these funding programs more closely with institutions of learning so that we step up our game. In addition, we believe government can establish policies that technology companies that export to Nigeria fund programs at Nigerian universities. Not simply train 100 youth to use their software, which is wonderful, but fund programs that allow Nigerians to create real value addition to their products and drive economic value. Can we test for Intel or Microsoft? Can we provide new recognition software for Google Maps? Can we gather new weather data for analysis and sell into global markets? The most innovative universities in the world out of the US certainly do this. And for Nigeria, it is a challenge in terms of how our universities are currently ranked on a global scale. It is an issue of national importance, and our government has a pivotal role to play to improve our national competitiveness. We believe doing this will also help tackle our growing unemployment challenges because it will improve the supply of qualified engineers and other technology workers, which will make Nigeria attractive to global players in telecommunications for multinational investment, given the size of the Nigerian market. With the size of our market, I wonder, can Nigeria play a leading role in driving emerging technologies and solving local problems that we could proliferate around the African continent? Too many parts of our continent are still suffer the consequences of unfavorable climatic conditions, be it desertification, impact of rain and flooding, inability to predict weather, to support modern agricultural practices. We do not have technology in our learning institutions. We certainly do not have at the primary and secondary levels the degree of adoption of technology that can compete on a world-class basis. How about low-cost electronic learning devices to improve educational outcomes? How about in the area of power, where we remain challenged, and security, where we could focus on alternative sources of energy optimization devices, and compensating electronics to manage the incessant number of power failures and fluctuations that we deal with every day? How about metering applications so that we could have I would say we could eliminate the era of estimated billing, or what we are currently plagued by our various privatized power companies. In security alone, Nigeria in recent years spent $475 million with a Chinese company to deliver CCTV solutions that do not really work. Could Nigerian engineers have achieved better results if provided with that funding over a period of 5 years? And finally, compete on a world-class basis. How about low-cost electronic learning devices to 2018 educational outcomes? How about in the area of power, where we remain challenged, and security, where we could focus on alternative sources of energy optimization devices, and compensating electronics to manage the incessant number of power failures and fluctuations that we deal with every day? How about metering applications so that we could have I would say we could eliminate the era of estimated billing, or what we are currently plagued by our various that we have today. Can we not apply machine learning or artificial intelligence to actually track the movement of herds and herdsmen, locational based systems, so that we better ensure our security? That we have today. These are challenges that we face in our national development. And I think these challenges represent new areas of opportunity for our department and our younger engineers to consider as we look towards the future. I have to say, our distinguished Professors Kehnide and Adegboyega, they studied, they researched, they innovated to equip a generation of Nigerians to play younger engineers to consider as we look towards the future. I have to say, our distinguished Professors Kehnide and Adegboyega, they studied, they researched, they innovated to equip a generation of Nigerians to play younger engineers to consider as we look towards the future. I have to say, our distinguished professors
Thank you very much, Engineer Funke Opeke. That was a very, very mind-probing lecture, forcing us to ask ourselves a lot of questions as regarding how we can prefer solutions using electronic devices and instrumentation in national development. Please, for that beautiful lecture, could we give her another round of applause? Forcing us to ask ourselves a lot of questions as regarding how we can. And I think that is a call to using the younger generation of engineers being trained. One of the last points she made happens to border on security of this nation, especially with the challenge we're having with the Fulani herdsmen and all. I thought of it also that if there was something that could be done to monitor movement devices and engineers being trained, one of the last points, especially with the challenge we're having with the Fulani herdsmen and all, I thought of it also that if there was something that could be done to monitor movement devices and engineers being trained, one of the last points in the house, our professors in the house, it has opened the window for us to look more into things that we can do that can provide solutions. And if we indeed have to get a gap here for our students before they go on NYSC to go into labs, to research, to come up with these solutions, I think in the house, once the solutions are preferred, the future will be a better place. Ma, before you go, we have some presentations to give to you. And we really want to appreciate your coming, and I think I'll just move on quickly by calling on the Dean for Faculty of Technology to come up to the microphone to make the presentations that will be done now. Sir, Professor Adegboyega, to the microphone. To appreciate your coming, and I think I'll just move on quickly by calling on the Dean for Faculty of Technology to come up to the microphone to make the presentations that will be done now. Sir, Professor Adegboyega, to the microphone. To appreciate your coming, and I think I'll just move on quickly by calling on and while the Dean is coming to the microphone, why quickly use this opportunity to recognize the presence of Professor T.O. Olugbisi from the African Institute for Science and Innovation.